Welcome to Toronto After Dark. My name is Peter Kaplowski. I'm the senior programmer with the festival, and I'm here to set things up for our Rue Morgue presentation of Why Horror? So let's give a big round of applause to our sponsors, to Space, Cineplex, Anchor Bay Entertainment, and of course, Rue Morgue! And while we're applauding, let's keep applauding. Let's applaud for the volunteers and the staff and the tech team that put this all together. So great. So I will be handing this microphone off to Dave Alexander very shortly, but first I would like to call to the stage Neil Cavalier, the director of our Canada After Dark short, Last Breath. This is a particularly twisted little short with some very impressive camera work and more than a few people that, oh my god, this is very unprofessional of me. It was just Adam. That more than a few people who frequently attend Toronto After Dark might recognize a few people in this movie. Neil, how would you like to set the film up?
I have no idea. It was like really easy to make. It cost no money. The effects are literally made out of garbage. No, they're garbage from another film in Toronto After Dark, part of the ABCs of Death. Chris Nash made a sweet film and gave me his effects afterwards, and I was like, how do I use these? Yeah, and I don't know, that's it.
Can you speak a little bit to where you shot it? Because it's a pretty impressive and desolate looking location.
Oh, it's at my parents' house. Dad's here tonight, thanks Dad.
Thank you, Neil. And now, before bringing up Dave, I got two things to say. We got one more night, and we're showing Let Us Pray and The Babadook. The first screening of The Babadook is sold out, but the second screening still has tickets. If you know anyone who was bummed that couldn't get a ticket, we got a second screening, 11:45 Friday. And then also, there's still tickets for Let Us Pray. What are you doing, guys? Let Us Pray is fantastic. It's got an incredible soundtrack. Pollyanna McIntosh is amazing. So is Liam Cunningham. If you are coming to Babadook, come a little early and check out Let Us Pray. So now, without further ado, Dave Alexander.
For those of you that don't know, I'm the editor-in-chief of Rue Morgue magazine. I think I've got a static electricity problem, if you can hear that. I'm here to welcome you to our Cinemacabre movie nights. We do this every month in the city of Toronto. We're usually at the Royal, but we like to partner up with Toronto After Dark Film Festival, who just keep getting bigger and better, and I'd really like you guys to give them a round of applause, because those guys have worked so hard over the last 10 days or so. They're so enthusiastic. The program has been so great this year that it's exciting to support these guys and to watch it grow, and have all you guys out here to see these films that don't get a chance to hit big screen anymore, it seems. It all seems to be, DVD bin, Netflix, or it's got to be at least a $50 million movie. But this is where the really cool stuff is often happening, so thank you for supporting all that. Let's see. Okay, this is also a first for me. This is the first time I've ever introduced a film that I'm actually in, which is a little weird. So I hope I blew my nose before I got interviewed and all that stuff. It's a little strange. But this is also kind of a family affair, because there's a lot of Rue Morgue people involved with it, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But let's bring one of our regular writers, who's also the star of this film, and one of my great buddies. I love this guy. Tal, come on up with the rest of your crew.
Thanks. This is Nicolas, Kleiman, and Rob Lindsay, the co-directors of Why Horror. This is wicked.
So there's all kinds of people here above and beyond family members, because you're in your hometown. Yeah. Do you guys want to call out a few of the other people that worked on the film, or you can do that after? I don't know if you're prepared, but it just seems that there's so many people here that are in the movie.
Like this section here, just want to thank this section here. Tons of people. For fear of leaving people out, because there's just so many. I know everybody wants to hear their name right now, but maybe we'll do that after. I'll write it down.
I got an idea. Instead of saying their name, why don't we just put it on text at the end of the movie and you can see it.
How about this? How about this? If you're in the movie or involved in making the movie, put your hand up. And say woo as well. Now everybody put your hand up and say woo. That's cool. I like that a lot when you do that.
All right. I want to thank some of our other sponsors, Kraken Rum, Eyesore Cinema, of course, Toronto After Dark Film Festival. And we're going to give away some prizes and stuff. You guys can help with that. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about what we're in for. Why did you guys want to make this movie? And why is Tal the guy to have his head explode on this poster? Why is he the Why Horror guy?
I think it comes down to Tal is a perfect proxy for every horror fan. I think horror fans will definitely see their life on screen when they see this movie. And more important, I think the idea of the movie is to showcase that horror is not as simplistic as it looks. There's a lot more to it. And I think horror, and especially non-horror fans, will actually like it because they will get to understand and review some films that right away they were like, oh, I don't like this. I understand there's a lot more layers to it. It's not as simple as it looks.
Rob agrees.
So tell us, give us a taste of some of the locations you traveled to across the globe that we're going to be visiting tonight.
Well, have you ever heard of Toronto?
No, move along.
So we started there. We went to Tokyo. We went to Mexico City, a little town in the south of Mexico City called Xochimilco, which really, really does it up for Day of the Dead. And that's why we went there. We went to London, England, New York, hell of a town, and Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and Waterloo. You'll know it when you see it.
And before we give away some swag, I want to ask how the whole two-director thing worked in this case. Did you guys have very set jobs, or were you at each other's throats? How did that go?
No, actually, we worked pretty well together. Nick and I have worked together for many years on various projects, and so we decided to take this one on together, and we really did work really well together. We kind of took all of the different aspects of the film and sort of literally did them together, from producing, directing, to editing, even a little bit of writing together, camera, exactly, whatever it takes. So yeah, we really did work together well. So.
And also I would say, like, even though the two of us are directing, and the crate and whatever, like, I would say, like, it's the three of us. Like, the three of us have been in the same office every day for the past 2 years thinking about this. So regardless of the crate and however it works, and, what you will see is Tal's life on screen, I think it's impossible to, like, leave Tal out of this, And it's not only his life on screen, and that makes him the main character, but it's also the knowledge that he brought, and definitely different points of view that we didn't have about it. I think that's really important to remark.
And I thought it was fun to play these guys against each other. It was really easy. Like, you tell Nick, can we do this? Yeah, that's a good idea. Bring it to Rob. Rob's like, what's wrong with you guys? Just really when on those days when you're editing and I've got nothing to do, just screwing with them emotionally. It's really fulfilling. Really why I got into this business.
My favorite part of the making of this film was I'd be sitting in my office and Tal would come by and he'd start pacing around and he would cock his hat back on his head and maybe he'd put his hand in his beard and he'd go, dude, it's so crazy, dude.
There's no words sometimes for some shit, you know what I mean? It's like 1 minute you're watching Dawn of the Dead for the 85th time, and then the next minute you're like, hey, let's go to Japan and talk to all the guys there. So it's what do you say to that except, dude, Dude, it's so crazy. And that's it, that's really...
My point being, you are having your mind blown constantly just by making this project, and I think that's going to translate to what you guys are going to see on screen. Because as much as we know that the world of horror is big, after you watch this, it's going to add another stratosphere to it, I'd say.
And here's the extra stratosphere in my particular little stratosphere. In about 2001 or maybe 2002, I discovered this little sort of backroom screening series in a dive bar on Queen West across the street from the mental institution called the Vatican, and it's called Cinema Macabre, and in the paper they were advertising a screening of Zombie Holocaust. And I was like, who's doing this without me? Like, what the? So I said, holy shit, I gotta go check this out. And I went on a date with a lady who's here tonight with me, who I eventually married. And I discovered this whole crew of people who were like getting together and writing about horror movies and watching horror movies. And I was like, holy shit, I gotta get in on this, because this is like my lost tribe, you know what I mean? Like I finally found like the people I'm supposed to watch these goofy rubber monster horror movies with and like hang out with, and she bought me the Mickey, my wife, who I married, which, yeah, so that's, anyway. She bought me the Blood Feast 2 issue, and so now I'm here at Cinema Cobb, and it's like effing crazy. And I was at the first Toronto After Dark, and I've come to all of them, and it's like double whammy bucket list that just kind of like, not only the making of the movie, but as it keeps going on, all this like cool stuff that keeps happening. So I'm like running out of like juice in my mouth. What do you call it? Spit? But yeah, like I'm really, this is crazy for me. This is like the nexus of experiences and all other sort of pretentious shit, I guess.
Amazing. Then, who feels good to be a horror fan right now? Come on up, guys. Round of applause for our filmmakers.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sticking around. It's cool. We're talking, just saying how we feel. We feel pretty good.
Yeah. You should feel good.
Well, I'm sure.
It's a weeknight, it's a late screening, and there's still a pretty full house that want to know more about your film. That's always a very, very good sign.
Groovy.
I want to ask before we go any further, so what kind of horror is your son into? I saw him playing with The Walking Dead. Seems kind of into Godzilla.
He loves Godzilla. He loves making Godzilla sounds. I'm going to assume that he's way into Maximum Overdrive because he loves trucks. Autonomous trucks. You know, he loves monsters. He loves screaming. I don't know if they're related. But, you know.
So obviously we know Tal is a horror fan. How about our directors? Are you guys big horror fans? What's your relationship like to horror?
Yeah, I think we grew up, Nick and I think, had similar growing up, that we grew up, I'll say casual horror fans, like we were horror fans, but not, as we joke with Tal, is he's all in. If he's playing poker, he's all in. And we were more casual fans, and then certainly the more movie savvy I became, the more horror fan I became as we went along, so that's my story.
I think it's kind of similar. In my case, I always say, like, somebody mentioned, actually it's not in the documentary, but Rodrigo at some point mentioned that horror is basically one more language. And I agree with that. I mean, give me a good movie. Whether it's horror, it's fucking awesome. If it's something else, it's good as well, you know? But I would say that, and this is what I mentioned before, this dog definitely made me reanalyze a lot of the things I saw before. And a lot of my own preconceptions that I had about the genre, like, I would look at films nowadays differently, you know, under a different light.
What was, I'd actually like to ask all you guys, having gone through the process and traveled around, interviewed these people, and had such an inflow of information about the horror genre, what was something that sticks out in your mind in terms of how your relationship to it changed?
For me, the line of the movie is when a social anthropologist named Joseph Hayes, that's what he does, he said that, you know, when we form cultures based on shared experiences, and a culture based on subjecting themselves repeatedly to fear-inducing stimuli, it see through the illusions that life has to offer us pertaining to the mysteries of death, because we're offered a lot of different explanations and a lot of sort of ways we should handle it, and what happens. Maybe perhaps we sprout wings and play harps up in the clouds, some say, and I think what he said, which really resonated with me, which was a big aha moment, was that, you know, horror fans kind of get away from all the sort of theorizing as to what happens after we die, and it's like a toy. It's like you play with that toy in the dark and then you leave it for a while, but the thing is, you play with it, you engage it, you tackle it, and you don't necessarily come away with answers, but at least you try to process a kind of an alternative way of looking at that whole thing. And that really changed it for me. I mean, you know, this movie, and it's like for horror fans, it's almost like you don't gotta tell them this stuff, you know what I mean? It's almost like we know already, so it was like a burning thing to try to explain it to other people, and that's a big thing, because Joseph isn't necessarily a horror fan. He's like, he observes cultures, and to look at the culture of horror from outside, I thought, wow, that was really eye-opening. I thought that was really rad.
I actually agree with you, Tal. I mean, I think Joseph is probably my favorite interview. I think the concepts that he brings to the documentary, and even the stuff that is on in the documentary, is really interesting. It made me appreciate horror as a culture, because I think part of what we show, you know, of you growing up is, you know, you would know one horror fan here, one horror fan there, and what he mentioned, plus the experience of traveling around, and you know, Japan is a perfect example. Suddenly in the middle of nowhere, you meet this dude, and it's you. You know, it's you on the other side of the world. It's unique. That being said, also I think what I did learn about it, and is the idea of confronting any fear directly. You know, I mean, the idea that if you're afraid of something, you don't run away from it. You just go ahead straight at it, and basically you see what happens. But again, you do know you're gonna be safe. You know, you're gonna be okay. And I think that's, again, it was quite a discovery.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all that. And for me, I really resonated with the universal language of horror. No matter where we went, not just movie references, but just being Tal talking about to whoever he talked to, whether it was someone we interviewed or on the street or whatever, that really all around the world, people band together with, it's like they share the same language, the language of horror. And that was really resonated more than I really ever realized that was out there.
Cool. And I would mention something else, which is something that Tal mentioned before. Something said, horror fans already know this. And I agree, and I think part of our intention as filmmakers was to make a movie as much for horror fans, for non-horror fans. Because I think one of the things that horror suffers from is this misconception, is misunderstanding. You know, it's just simply gore, it's just blood and that's it. And no, there's a lot more than it. And I was just actually talking to a friend. She was like, oh, I really, really like it, and I don't like horror. And I'm like, in a way, I kind of feel it plays even better to non-horror fans. Because horror fans, as you said, they know this, they experience it day to day. But non-horror fans, I think they're going to come out of this theater, and hopefully other theaters, looking at this and saying, you know what, you know, that crazy dude that I knew before or whatever, he's not crazy. Like, he actually has his feet on the ground, and you know, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I feel like for this film, for non-horror fans, it's a revelation, and for horror fans, it's an affirmation, and both of those experiences are very satisfying. And it's definitely having a dialogue with horror fans and non-horror fans, the audience. So let's hear from you guys. If you have a question, put your hand up. I'll find you, and then I will repeat it so everyone can hear. I saw some up there. Oh, way up in the back, sir. Stand up. Yell it out.
What was the most surprising thing you learned about horror making this movie?
What was the most surprising thing that you learned about horror making this movie?
The most surprising thing about horror, well, I don't know if it was surprising, but wherever you go, I will say that The Exorcist is the most important horror film ever made, because wherever you go, it's always the same reaction. Like, that movie changed the way I think about everything. Like, that's what you hear from people. Like, no matter what country you go to, no matter what age group of horror fan, it's always The Exorcist messed everybody up. And actually, my mom, you know, she went to go see The Exorcist in the theater and left as soon as the Reagan voice started. And it's, that was a pretty surprising thing. Another surprising thing, and I won't necessarily mention names, but this is a very kind of philosophical question, why horror? And sometimes you get very non-philosophical answers from the older generation of filmmakers who look at life and perhaps the industry in a very practical way. So we're fishing for a lot of deep shit, you know, why do you make horror? And they said, well, because I made a movie in the 60s that was really successful and nobody lets me make anything else. And that's the answer you're getting, and we're fishing for all this deep, like, soul-plunging shit, and we get an answer like that. So that was kind of like, okay, next question, you know, moving right along. That's really those couple things were the big surprise for me.
I think it goes back to the universality of it. I think that again, we went to 4 different continents and different situations, and even after we showed the movie, like we just came back from Mexico from showing the movie there, and like people were deeply affected. And this idea that, you know, you have people around the world that live the same life as you did, for me was quite impressive actually, because it talks about, again, like how it's a language that pretty much anyone can learn and enjoy, and they do everywhere. I don't think there's a place without horror, even whether it's for dinner or whatever.
This doesn't answer the question, but could I give a shout out to Tal's mom? She was such a trooper to put herself through everything she did that we made her do, or that she chose to do. So thank you so much.
We love you, Mrs. Tal.
And the promo before, like, coming soon on Space, she had her head like this, like in the non-scary part, and my dad's laughing. That was pretty funny.
We got other questions.
So many questions.
How about, well, I'll take this one right on the side here first.
Hey, Cal.
Hey, Jim.
I want to know, we both interviewed a lot of horror people. Do you think horror filmmakers of today are they're more into the genre, they're more of fans than, say, the people that used to make horror movies back in the 50s, 60s, 70s? Do they have more of an appreciation for the for the movies they make than people that came before them?
So the person asking the question is James Burrell, who writes for Rue Morgue. Hence, he mentioned that he interviews a lot of people as well, and he wants to know if you found it to be the case that younger generation of filmmakers are much more fans of the genre than the older generation, and then maybe you could expand upon that a little bit and give us a few thoughts as to why that is.
Okay, I will say not necessarily. There definitely is decades more work for modern younger filmmakers to sort of take into account when they're crafting their stories. But no, George Romero used to read EC comic books under a blanket with a flashlight. John Carpenter is a huge fan of horror. I mean, the original Thing, I think, is his all-time favorite movie. But I also would say that sort of later generations have had, there was such a thing as a horror fan. There were, you know, maybe back then there was one magazine that was out, and that was Famous Monsters and maybe Monster Times and a couple. Now there's tons. Now there's like social events and horror fashion and all kinds of ways to express your fandom. So I don't know if they're more or less fans. The newer guys that are coming up are more or less fans than the older guys that are out there, but there's just more avenues now to express that.
I suppose because of the internet and the fact that it's all out there, it definitely feels that the newer generations are bigger fans because they have forums to talk about it and people want to talk about it with them more. Whereas I assume older generations, they probably weren't fielding those fan type questions and having those fan type interactions as much.
And then also additionally, I think it becomes kind of like almost cool to like reference old stuff. I mean, I'm sure they did too, but it was just too old for me to pick up on it. So, you know, several filmmakers are very happy to pay homage to the older guys. So, you know, if you watch a Rob Zombie or an Eli Roth movie, you can pick out the influences and stuff like that very obviously sometimes. And, you know, so I think the concept of the horror fan has definitely gelled in this modern time, and it's just maybe louder and prouder than they used to be, maybe.
Right here.
Yeah, was there anything that you wanted to include in the documentary but couldn't due to either time, rights, or any other extraneous circumstances?
Question is, were there any big fish that you wanted to land for this documentary that you were unable to get for various reasons?
Yeah, we wanted footage from the movie Big Fish in this. No, yes. So basically we conducted 60-something interviews, each lasting anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. And yeah, there's gold in them hills, you know what I mean? Hey. So he's just saying hello. Yeah, so there's loads of stuff in there. Alan Jones, British journalist, tells a story about how one of the first festivals he ever put on, he runs a festival in the UK called Fright Fest. And there was 2 women in the audience, and he was sure that they were at the wrong movie. And he went, "Excuse me, ladies, this is a horror film. I believe you want the cinema 2 doors down." And they said, "Fuck off, we love Texas Chainsaw Massacre, sonny boy. Get the fuck out of here." Like, and like, they gave him this like really deadly response, and that was in there. And there was, I think like, there's a scene that with Gary Pullen talking about, you know, how his folks also had to kind of fight off the neighbors and say like, my kid's okay, he might draw skeletons, but, you know, and then in Gary's own words, he says, you know, "I'm not gonna shove firecrackers up your cat's ass," or anything like that. And any kind of thing like that, I always like to have in a movie. But how about you guys?
I just want to interject and say that Gary's parents are so supportive of what he does and what we do in the horror genre that they came all the way here from London to be at the screening, and they're in the crowd tonight. I want to say thank you for making the trip. Yeah, London, Ontario. Still. But I mean, just as Gary's friend and coworker, you know, his parents would go out of their way to say what a great job we were doing and how interested they were in stuff that was happening in the mag and how great they thought it was. And have that support is amazing, especially, you know, for people that aren't necessarily engaging the horror genre in the way that we are.
So I'm gonna go back to your question. In my case, it's not about stuff that we left out, it's stuff that we didn't shoot. I wanted to get a lot more into this idea of real fear, as in when your life is in danger. And I had this whole idea of throwing Tyler off an airplane, because I know he's kind of afraid of that. That kind of died really quickly, sadly.
I'm afraid of heights. Like, that's not, you don't do that to a guy that's afraid of heights. No, that's not the reason. That's the reason you don't do it, okay? I'm already getting, like, I'm getting freaked out just talking about it. Don't even. There's a whole reel of people talking about what it was like when they were kids and stuff. Like, there's a ton, man. Like, the Blu-ray is gonna be amazing. We'll all meet back here and watch it in a few years.
Let's grab another question. Yeah, right there. I think I see a green shirt. Is that you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's hard to see in the spotlight. Go ahead, be loud, please.
Yes.
When the boy is of age to start engaging in cinema, what are the essentials on the list?
Oh, this is a great question. When his son is old enough to partake in the horror genre more, what's going to be his bread and butter?
Well, I'm gonna start, I mean, we've already started it with the Godzilla, clearly. But I want to show him stuff that is, I guess, like monster-y. So, I mean, I can't wait to like sit and watch Dark Crystal with him. Not that that's a horror movie, but as far as like creatures and like awesome epic stories and like rad cool stuff, I mean, that one's up there. I guess less graphic stuff. I mean, probably Poltergeist or whatever. I know, when he's not a baby, okay? Now he's a baby, when he's a little older. But I don't know, I'll probably just wing it and sort of pay attention to the ratings and nothing too graphic or gruesome or sexual or sweary, because he's gonna repeat all that shit, you know what I mean? Like, I fucking did, so.
So, what age does he get to watch a Serbian film? I think is the question.
Well, yeah, Serbian film. Google that, you know what I mean? Don't, because you will be on a watch list if you Google that.
I saw more questions.
Gnarly
I'm
is
looking.
the
Oh,
movie.
way up there in the back corner. Yes.
So first of all, congratulations. I'm not a horror fan, but I'm up for it now.
Oh, cool.
I guess the question is, where do you think horror is going next, considering we've seen it pretty much all now, and today's news are pretty much graphic, so what are your thoughts?
The question is, where do you see the direction of the genre going next?
Well, horror has a remarkable ability to adapt to everything. So every technological change that comes along on Earth, there's usually a wave of horror that kind of follows that. So, do you know what creepypasta is? That stuff is super big with like young kids. It's basically like 17-year-olds trading urban myths about weird stuff they see in the woods. And that stuff is enormous. I mean, so it's almost like, I almost feel like it's going back to like the oral tradition of like suggestion and almost this Lovecraftian did I see it or did I not see it kind of vibe. Also, like, you know, cell phone games and stuff like that. For example, the Why Horror game, which you can get on Android or iPhone. But that'll depend, in my opinion, on the changes in culture and changes in society. So where it'll go next, I don't know. Probably remakes will probably catch on real big.
What about sequels? Do you think sequels will ever be popular?
No, that'll never happen. 19 Freddy movies later.
One thing I did notice at TIFF, did anyone see a film called Cub? Yeah. That film shocked me in how much violence there was between and towards children. And it made me think, is this the next place that we're gonna go?
Dude, every third thing in ABCs of Death 2 is like a kid in a meat grinder. You know what I mean? I hope it's like the final taboo, I think. At least that's as far as my brain goes, but
Lord of the Flies. Everything's Lord of the Flies.
there you go, Lord of the Flies. So next it's gonna be like Lord of the Aphids.
And speaking of Lord of the Rings, you had Elijah Wood narrate the animated sequence in there. We should touch on that very briefly before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
How did he get on board?
We had a Kickstarter campaign, and for all of you that contributed, thank you very much. And one of the names that came through was E. Wood, and we were like, oh, wouldn't that be funny if it was Elijah? And sure enough, it was. So he actually tweeted out that he had supported us, and so then we decided to do an animation section of, we knew we couldn't cover all the movies, the horror movies, and also we knew that has already been done in all these type of documentaries before. So we decided what's the best way that we could do it. So Tal came up with a way too brief history of horror, and then so we thought, wouldn't it be great to take a break from Tal telling it and have someone else tell it? So we started rhyming off names of Christopher Walken and like all these different people that, wouldn't it be great if we could get them to do it? And then Nick and I kind of looked at each other like, okay, no, seriously, who should we get? And they're like, didn't Elijah Wood contribute to our Kickstarter? So we literally just called him and said, what do you think? And he totally did. And I kept waiting for an agent to call me, and he never did. And so it was great, yeah. So he totally came on board. It was terrific.
Amazing. We got to wrap it up here, so I want you guys to give these guys a hella big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Super Channel and CMF and you, Lucy, too. Thanks to our families.
And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, you saw the ad up there. Next Cinema Cobb is going to be Mondo VHS, put together by our own gourmet. Tal is going to join us. It's going to be crazy clips taken from VHS. There's going to be commentary. There's going to be beer at the theater. It's going to be a party.
There's gonna be beard at the theater.
Yeah, beards at the theater. And don't forget to come join us at the office for Pub After Dark right now. These guys are going to be there, and they'll tell you why horror. Good night.
Thank you again.